All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Blazor Community Stand-Up, where we talk about the latest updates to .NET web development. I'm Daniel Roth. I'm the Principal Product Manager for ASP.NET Core and Blazor on the .NET team. And I'm joined here with some very special guests. We have, of course, Javier Calvarro Nelson, Principal Software Engineer and Architect on the ASP.NET Core and Blazor team. Hello, Javier.
Hello, everyone.
And then we have two additional special guests today from our friends at Progress Telerik. First, we have Maya. She is a software engineering manager at Progress Software and works on the Telerik UI for Blazor team. Hi, Maya.
Hi, guys.
It's great to have you with us. And then we also have Stamo. He is a principal software engineer at Progress Software and works on the Telerik UI for Blazor team as well. Hi, Stamo.
Hello, everybody.
It's great to have you both with us today. Of course, we have to address the elephant in the room. Javier, how are you feeling about the World Cup game today? You know, are you feeling like this is gonna work out for you guys over in Spain?
I'm hoping so. I was actually looking at the clock and I said, like, we cannot extend this meeting too long.
Right. No, we have things to watch and see. Yeah, the game's later today. We will definitely be off before then. Absolutely. You know, good luck to Spain. You know, for all the other people from different countries whose teams didn't make it this far. I'm so sorry. You know, I hope you're dealing with your grief well. But yeah, it's exciting to see how the World Cup eventually pans out. All right, enough about soccer or football or whatever it's called. Today we have a cool topic. We're going to be talking about generative UI with some of the latest AI protocols and standards with AGUI and A2UI. And our friends over at Progress have been doing some really interesting things and experiments with building generative user interfaces using .NET, using Blazor, and they're here to talk with us about it. So Stamo, do you want to kick it off? Tell us what is generative UI? What does this even mean?
Yeah, the big question, right? So generative UI, as you might know, all the applications that we use today with like the chatbots, different AI applications, they're all focused on one thing. This is the generative transformer architecture. So the main idea here is that you input a text and you get text back. Now, of course, you might get some images, you might get video, you might get other content, but in general, it's text-based, or it can be translated to text. With generative UI now, the idea is that instead of just text, you might get something cooler. So imagine that you ask a question and you do not only get like text, you can get, for example, some interactive widgets. Imagine a scenario where you, for example, visit a website and you open a chat client and you ask about, let's say, the share price of some company. And instead of just getting the quote of this share, you might get some interactive charts with earnings of this company, or some grids, or some other useful widgets that will help you get more idea about the company, about how the share price is doing. So in essence, generative UI is about an AI model or an agent, or this is, of course, the generative part that generates UI, and the UI stuff is rendered in your application. So we get like more interesting stuff than just text. And just to be clear from the start, generative UI has different names. Okay, so you might call it Agentic UI, you might call it Dynamic UI. Some other names are AI-powered UI. So although these terms have some nuances, all right, we will refer to the same thing here. UI that is generated with the help of some AI agent doing some cool stuff in the background. And of course, we as developers using some common technologies in order to render this UI. And one final thing for this slide. Although we're talking about Blazor and our demos and the presentation is based on web technologies, you can use generative UI in other .NET applications. For example, if you have a WPF application or ASP.NET MVC or web forms application, there are ways for you to use generative UI and include it in your project and maybe build some cool stuff.
Well, yes. This is saying that the text-based chat is not the the full story for how you can interact with an agent. I know we often think of like, oh, you talk to an agent by typing text, but that doesn't have to always be that way, right? Like there could be lots of things that you would improve your interaction with an agent, like having custom widgets, having the agent be able to present data to you in interesting ways, like with charts and graphs. If it wants to provide you a bunch of options, giving you a drop down or buttons that you can click on, all these types of things could enrich that agentic interaction as opposed to just having to type text.
Yeah, definitely. So you started chiming in this topic. So why do we need generative UI? So on one hand, it seems like it's somewhat risky, right? So if an agent is able to generate UI and give it to my end users of my website, let's say, this might be a problem. So the widgets might be jumbled. They might ask for, let's say, some data that is confidential or something like that. But as we're going to show, the whole concept has various ways for you to be sure, and you have actually control over what is rendered and how is it rendered, and actually what can possibly be rendered. So it is not random stuff. Don't worry about it. You have various ways and various ways to safeguard this, to address the risky stuff, let's say. And apart from that, the whole idea here is that you can get much more personalized experience and something that is contextual. So imagine that you land on for example, let's say a site for different news, and depending on your preferences, for example, statistics, you have, for example, read news about the football matches or about concerts or technology. The site can use these preferences, this data that it has around your profile, and actually generate UI widgets that are more relevant to you. So, for example, with the case with the stock prices and the companies, it is clear that instead of just seeing some news about what happened with the earnings of the company, it will be much more. It will be nicer if you can open the news and you see, for example, the charts of the earnings report. You can interact with them. You can drill down and see maybe the earnings from previous year. So that is all something that generative UI can deliver to you now. And it also helps us developers in a way that we don't need to like implement each and every layout of each and every page that is available in our website. We can leave some of this to the agents, to the generative stuff, and we can focus on using the best UI widgets that we can get. All right, so
it's almost like there's a actually this slide looks like it's going to be about what I was just about to mention, is that it's almost like there's a spectrum here, right? Like you can give the AI lots of flexibility to like even potentially generate completely custom UI elements that it decides in the moment is like, this is the right way to present this data or for the user to interact with me. Or I can imagine like kind of constraining things and saying like, well, the AI can kind of, I give it a few widgets that it can use in very constrained cases. And then there's just like, very static situations, which this looks like exactly the stuff we're talking about.
So there are different types of generative UI. So the classification here, of course, is what we have now. Maybe in the future we might have other types which are more flexible. But for now, the idea is we can start with the first level, which is the so-called static generative UI or predefined. This is the most conservative way to approach it. It's basically using an AI agent and rendering a set of components that you have predefined. So here, there's nothing that the AI agent actually determines in terms of what widgets to render. So it's more like data exchange. For example, you exchange data, let's say, about a concert or an other event or a football match. And once you get this data, you have predefined the widgets that are going to render, for example, let's say the date of the match, maybe some video from previous matches, maybe some chart for statistics for previous wins and losses of the club. And this is the most conservative one, as I said. You have really full control. And yeah, there are cases for this that are useful. And maybe as a first step to actually incorporating the generative UI idea in your website, you might start with this one. But on the other hand, on the other side of the spectrum is the second type, which is the so-called open-ended or free-form generative UI. This takes things to the extreme, let's say. You have the ability to render almost arbitrary HTML. This type of specification is led by the folks from the MCP UI specification. You might have heard about them.
Yeah, the apps, yeah.
Yeah, so although this might sound extreme, so it's really hard to be sure and accept that you can render arbitrary HTML on your web page. Of course, there are some ways for you to sanitize this, and it depends. So, for example, if you're using an internal application, they're just not internet apps, they're intranet apps. So, in some cases, this might be the thing for you, although it sounds extreme. So what sits behind these two, what sits between these two types is what we're going to show today, which is the so-called declarative generative UI, or maybe another name is the controlled type. So this uses the so-called A2UI specification. We're going to elaborate on that in a moment. So this essentially allows you to configure what type of components and what parameters, what properties do and capabilities, of course, these components have in order to be rendered. So for example, if you specify a list of, let's say, components like charts and grids or forms or some input elements, these are the only elements that can be rendered. So let's say that you think it's kind of risky to allow a user to upload some files because you need to think about extensions, about corrupted files, about some exploits. You might disable this type of input. So if you do not include it in the list of possible components, then there's no way, even if the AI hallucinates for some reason, the input type upload will not be rendered.
So it's like you give the AI a fixed buffet of choices to pick from. Like you can render some custom UI, but you have to do it using these specific widgets or then these specific patterns. Is kind of like the declarative model. Yeah, that's
the idea. So this ensures that you're not surprised by some hallucinations or some inappropriate stuff that it might generate. And the nice thing is that you actually have control and you can build on top of the list step by step. For example, let's say that you implement a new component, like let's say a media player or something else, you can add it to the list right away and use it. But if, for example, this component is not production ready, it's in preview or whatever, you might decide to wait a bit and add it later.
So I think of the first one, like static, I think is like, it's kind of like a normal app, like apps we used to build for years where you just had a user interface that you defined. Like that user interface is in some sense static to that app. It's just that in the past, when you wanted to do something, you had to learn like which menu do I go digging into to figure out how to use feature X, Y, or Z. In the agentic world, you can then pair that static user interface with some agent that in some sense knows about the app's functionality. Like it can almost help you use it. It's kind of like Microsoft M365 Copilot, where I'm in Word or PowerPoint and I have my agent sitting on the side and it's helping me do things within the existing static UI of that application. Yeah. Open-ended, I think, is often used for like plugins. Like you have some agent and you want to like plug in some app functionality from someone else. And so you can't really constrain what UI they're going to show. Like, let's say you want to have like Microsoft Copilot that shows a UI for selecting your hotel from Expedia or whatever. Like you can't really dictate necessarily to Expedia like how they're going to display the hotels. You just kind of give them like an iframe and say like display your widget here and then have the agent kind of know about that. It has to be a little bit more flexible. That's kind of the MCP app scenario, I think, and MCP UI was sort of a precursor to that. And then declarative, I think, is more like you want the agent to have a flexible toolbox of UI widgets to choose from that it can kind of react to what the user needs. I'm really kind of curious for people in the chat if any of this resonates with you. Like, are any of you trying to build apps like this? Do you have do these rows, static, open-ended, declarative, map to scenarios that you're trying to implement today? If yes, please comment. Let us know about it. We'd love to hear what you're trying to build and what your experience is like with doing that.
Yes. So if we switch to the next slide, so now we're going to show a potential architecture. So after we have touched on the concepts, we're going to now focus on real technologies that are available today that will help you, implement the generative UI or the agentic UI concept in your web application. So we start on the left side. So we have our Blazor web app. We have some UI components, and we want to communicate with some AI model. This is the agent framework in this case. And in order to do so, we need some protocol, some way to communicate between these two things. So this is where the AGUI protocol comes into our toolbox. So I'm going to give some more details about it later, but you can imagine, for example, if you're familiar with the MCP protocol, this is the model context protocol, in a similar way of how MCP allows you to bridge the gap between AI and different external tools like databases or whatever. AGUI is the specification, the standard that you can use in order to seamlessly allow communication between an AI, this is the generative part, and UI, for example, this is your web app. So it gives you various things like events. You can use some state management. You can control the memory. So there are all kinds of nice things that you don't need to worry about. You can see the code on GitHub. It's fully open source. It is developed by the guys from Copilot Kit. I know that you had a session with Tyler from the Copilot Kit team about the AGUI topic. So maybe people from the chat can go back and watch it as well. And once we have this AGUI bit that bridges the gap between the UI and the agent stuff, if you want to use the so-called declarative generative UI, we can go and use the A2UI specification. Now, I know that these two names are pretty similar to each other. They're somewhat confusing. All right, but just think about the AGUI as the main protocol and A2UI as some extension that allows you to give the list of the components. So it's not about how the UI communicates with AI models and agents and stuff like that. It's more towards I can define a list of components, some widgets, their properties, their capabilities, and I help you to ensure that you're not going to get surprised and, for example, need to render a widget that is not included in the list. So basically, this is the list of technologies that we're using, and we have made some great progress there and tested some things. Yeah,
hopefully that helps answer this question from Jose about like what's the difference between AGUI and A2UI. And I do agree, like the names do sound very similar.
Yeah.
You explained it pretty well, Stamo. Like the AGUI is the like agent to user interface protocol. Like if you want to define how your agent and your user interface kind of interact with each other, that's what AGUI is for. And then A2UI is like a declarative format for giving the agent a set of a catalog of widgets that it can choose from to render in the UI stream. Is it almost like a tool call where you kind of like advertise to the agent like, hey, here are a bunch of widgets that you can choose from. If you want to use one, just let me know. And then the app kind of takes care of rendering that. Is that kind of how it works?
Yes, we have a slide where we show some code snippets, and you're going to see the concrete implementation. I know that there's a saying that talk is cheap, show me the code. So don't worry, we're going to show some code, but just to keep in mind, although we're using these technologies today, they're evolving. So although you might see some APIs or some code stuff today, it is evolving. So there might be better ways to do it in the future. And for your specific case, there might be additional APIs or additional helpers that you can use. So don't worry about the code too much. It's more of changing of how you think and approach UI, and generative UI might be one of your tools in your toolbox if you need it. All right, so we can continue with the next one. So now we're going to give some more details about the different building blocks that we mentioned on the previous slide. So about the Microsoft Agent Framework, I know that Dan can jump in and provide some information about what is going on there.
Yeah, this is us. So this is from Microsoft Agent Framework. So this is coming from my teams at Microsoft. So Microsoft Agent Framework is our recommended way for building agentic applications using .NET, but also other platforms too. They support, like, for example, Python if you're working in the Python ecosystem. But they have a .NET library as well. So this is the library you would use to define your agents, how they hook up to your models that you're using to power those agents, to give them a brain, hooking up tools to them. It's all built on this the Microsoft Extensions AI abstractions that we ship in the .NET platform. So iChat client and these types of things. Microsoft Agent Framework builds on top of those abstractions to give you an agent abstraction. And then with that agent abstraction, you then get a whole bunch of functionality. You get a whole bunch of observability and orchestration features. Like, they have a whole bunch of workflow style orchestrations that you can use to then have a bunch of agents like coordinate with each other in a deterministic way. The framework also provides like hosting endpoints APIs, so that you can then take your agent and expose them to your applications through appropriate AI protocols like A2UI. Like, you can take your Microsoft Agent Framework agent and say, like, map A2UI endpoint, and that will then give you an A2UI endpoint for that agent, or a responses API endpoint for that agent, whatever protocol makes sense for the particular scenario that you're doing. So this is the core library that we would recommend you use if you're trying to build your own agent and then expose it to your application, like through the A2UI protocol. So if you haven't tried it out, you should definitely give it a go. You can, of course, find the docs on Microsoft Learn, and we'll put some of those links in the URL list for today. But it's on top of this then that we build all this protocol support. Like I mentioned, you can map an A2UI endpoint. It's on top of Microsoft Agent Framework that we then provide A2UI support, so that your user interface, your agent can kind of drive and understand what's happening in the user interface. And we've been working with the Microsoft Agent Framework team on that A2UI support. I think we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I know it's currently in preview, but we're moving towards getting it fully feature complete and stable, hopefully shortly, like in the months ahead. Javier, I guess I'm the PM, so I always gonna overpromise on timeline. Soon it will be.
Yes,
exactly.
Be done.
All right. So the next two slides are focused on the AGUI protocol. We touched some bits on that. If you haven't watched the session with Tyler from the Copilot team from the community stand-up, go ahead and do that. It's interesting. And on the next slide, I will give the mic to Javier, who was the main driver behind the support of AGUI and .NET. So he can provide some details here.
Awesome. Yeah. So essentially what we have been working on with Copilot Keys is in the SDK, in the C# SDK or .NET SDK for AGUI. And it essentially has a couple of pieces. One, it has an AGUI server, which essentially you can use to map any chat client or any agent framework or anything like that into a standard AGUI endpoint that then you can also consume through either the Python client, the TypeScript client, or the C# client that we also ship. And the idea is that for .NET, since we actually have the benefit of having a set of standard exchange types, we essentially build everything on top of iChat client and all the different content types, and we map the protocol. But at the same time, we give you access to all the details. And the AGUI protocol implementation supports both SSE and server-sent events and protocol buffers. And it's designed in a way that in the future we can extend any transport that we want to support additional transport. And it should be on par with all the other features in the TypeScript SDK, as far as I know.
Cool. Yeah, it's
Nice.
exciting to see that contribution finally go up, where we have the new .NET SDK for AGUI showing up in the AGUI repo that we're going to be building on now in Microsoft Agent Framework. I think some of our audience members are swimming in the acronym soup, trying to figure out how to position all these protocols relative to each other. So let's take this one. Someone's asking, so is A2UI similar to MCP? Javier, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So no, A2UI is complementary to MCP, and the way to think about it is MCP is for when you have a tool, for example, from a third party, say the Microsoft documentation server, that you want to expose and make available to agents. That is what MCP is for. You essentially expose capabilities that people can consume in their agents through Copilot and so on. A2A is for when you need to communicate between agents, when you have a system where you have multiple agents and they need to interact with each other. And A2UI, AGUI, even myself get it wrong sometimes. AGUI is about standardizing the interface with the user interface. So for example, you can think of the Copilot user interface or the Visual Studio Code interface, chat interface, Copilot CLI, the Copilot CLI even. That's what AGUI is for. So for example, when people ask about things like A2UI or MCP apps, well, MCP apps is just the same MCP concept, but now allowing you to like show some UI widgets within your AGUI powered host.
So the quick summary for this, for folks who are trying to figure out all these protocols, the MCP protocol is for connecting agents to tools. You can think of it that way. Connecting your agents to tools is what MCP is for. AGUI is for connecting your agents to your user interface. Like you want to enable your agent to see what's going on in the user interface and be able to interact with it. To be able to build an agentic user interface, use AGUI. A2A, which is the one wasn't even in the chat, but Javier brought it up, so it's good to bring up. That's the agent-to-agent protocol. That's for agents to talk to other agents. Okay, and then the new one, the A2UI that we're talking about today, is when you're building a UI for your agent. How do you like expose a set of widgets that agent can then use as part of the user interface in a generative dynamic manner? Hopefully that lays it out. We probably need a cheat sheet. Someplace for people to refer to. And then some other people were asking about, because we had the community stand up last week about web MCP. Someone's asking, is this like web MCP? So remember, MCP is for connecting agents to tools. Web MCP is specifically for letting agents connect to tools that are provided by a web app, like a browser-based application. That's how you can kind of think about web MCP. If you missed our web MCP stand-up from last week, go check out the recording. The folks from Progress also had some cool stuff to show there about how you can build Blazor apps that support the web MCP protocol. So hopefully that helps. All right.
Yeah. So after this slide, it's time for code. So although this is a pseudocode, the main idea here is to reiterate on the concept that I said earlier. So do not focus too much on the code for now. So this code snippet shows how you can map an AGUI endpoint and call, let's say, a flight booking agent. This is the demo that we're going to demonstrate. But do not focus too much on this. There are other APIs that you can use. For example, the AGUI client is more relevant if you want to create real chat-like interface. And also know that although it sounds somewhat strange, you can use the generative UI and AGUI and the other stuff even without the chat. So if I return to the example from the start, if you open a web page, there might be no need, if I'm a developer, there might be no need for me to actually ask my user to type something or to give me information, because I might have already the preference in the interest of this user, and I might just render the UI that I know is preferable by the customer. For example, I might know he likes specific colors or fonts or specific widgets. And I do not need to ask them how do we want to render, for example, a news website or something else. I might start already and use agents and use them, leverage them in order to display UI that is based on some metadata that I might have. So with that, I'm giving the mic to Maya to talk more about the other term that is somewhat similar to A2UI, but it serves other purposes. So Maya.
Yeah, that's the thing we mentioned a couple of times. I hope it gets a little bit clearer after the slides and the demo. But yeah, it's the A2UI, which is Agentic UI. It's a protocol again developed by Google, open source, so you can run through GitHub and check it out. The current version is 1.0, and that's the official release candidate for now. But the idea here is that, as Stamo mentioned before, so far when you type something and prompt, the answer you get is just a text. But now with such protocols, you can get something far more beautiful and convenient to work with, and you're gonna get some widgets, components, whatever it is that is set up in the protocol. It's called the catalog. But yeah, with implementing this protocol and using it, you can have a lot more beautiful UI than just the text. And here the AGUI, it provides the communication protocol, while the A2UI helps rendering it safely in your app. And it mainly comprises of two, let's call it a little bit simplified, but it has two pieces. One of them is a renderer, that is the logic underneath that handles the rendering, in our case for Blazor. And the other part is the so-called catalog, that is the list of available components that you can use. And that's what Stamo mentioned before, that you have some predefined components that you can use. Those are listed in the catalog. So there's no way for the UI to generate something that is not in that catalog. So you get a kind of straightforward UI that is compliant with the UI. So how does something like that looks like? This is a sample definition of component, in this case card. It has kind of metadata that says to the AI what you can use that component for. In this case, is a card. You have description that says a component that displays short plain info with an optional image. So when you type something and the logic underneath your model and the AI underneath gives info and info back, that you have data that is descriptive, so you can use that card because it will match the description of that component. Again, here you have some properties like header and body, and those again have some metadata for it in the JSON file, in the catalog, so that the AI underneath knows what to do with those, what are they for. That's kind of the metadata for it. And to combine it all together, I will run through a demo, a pretty neat one that we developed here. It's in preview, and we chose, we integrated all those buzzwords that we mentioned a lot tonight: A2UI, AGUI, and Microsoft Agent Framework. So the integration of the demo is on top of all those technologies so that you get a smooth experience as possible. And of course, we are using Dynamic UI for Blazor. Here, you can create have as many use cases as you can think of. Basically, depends entirely on your scenario, on what you're building. But here we chose one that is pretty familiar to everyone, that is booking a flight assistant. In this case, instead of having a pretty, for me at least, overwhelming UI, you have some customized one for you. So in the first step, in the demo, you have a prompt. In this case, I want to get a flight from London to New York. Give me a plan as a dashboard with important data about the trip. Here you can write other things, but yeah, I doubt that somebody wants to see me writing and typing, but so you can give it a try on your own. But once you prompt something, the layers underneath will process your request, will analyze it, provide some info as an output, and then the A2UI layer will map that output and that context to the UI components that you have. In this case, here is the card that I mentioned before. You have some info inside, some header that contains the title of it, and pretty neat info about in the context that you asked for. You have grid that you can interact with, sort just as any grid. Again, that's our grid for UI, Telerik UI for Blazor, and again you have a chart that you can again interact with and provides you pretty nice UI for to interact with. And on the next steps in the demo, you get another prompt that's for booking a flight. So again, once you prompt all the layers, the AGUI, A2UI, and agent framework, all those that symbiosis of words, the result will be a customized UI for what you asked for. You have adequate components for the different options that you need to input otherwise. You will get the fields that you already provided here, London, so you don't need to write it again. London and New York are pre-filled. You get data inputs for selecting the return and back passengers, cabin, full name. Here I usually GDPR at its finest, but whatever. And once you commit the message, you get a booking confirmation. That's the last step for the demo here. But you're getting
form. That form that you showed was that form a widget that had already been defined? Like, was that full form? Was that in the catalog, or was it just the individual pieces and the agent then constructed the form itself from the like you have a text box and a label control in the catalog? What level of granularity was this demo using?
It's pieces getting together. It's not a predefined form because you don't know what fields you're gonna need. So they're populated and built based on the context, based on your prompt. So you get we provide, let's say we provide the fields like text box, data input, and things like that. And you get the need form with all the data that you need to fill out for
a form on the fly, so to say. Generate that form. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, I can imagine also being done in a little bit more of a constrained way, where you have like 2 or 3 specific forms that you tell the agent, here are some pre-canned forms that you can display when needed. Like, if it's a flight app, you might have that form kind of already defined, and it just renders the whole form as one widget. But that's up to you as the app developer to decide, I assume, right? Like, you get to decide what widgets go into the catalog and what granularity they are.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In our case, when we build that, our idea is to provide that out of the box for our client, so you don't need to take care of the rendering, the catalog, and handle all those components, but instead just use it out of the box. Have the components in the same theme as so the other ones for Telerik. You don't need to take care of the building, the maintenance, and all those things that take a lot of time actually. And in this case, you get the experience out of the box similar to the whole app. So you don't need to create a new app and new user experience, but instead you can build it exactly in what you already have. and continue to have the same experience. But yeah, and when something changes, like some requirements, for example, you have the UI generated for you. You don't need to rebuild the UI, but rather leave it to the user to prompt, and the UI will be generated for you.
That's good. Super cool. It's great to see that. Yeah, it's interesting the types of experiences that now enables. I know there were some comments earlier about shipping these kinds of apps and building these kinds of experiences. Like Michael Bond had commented earlier about wondering how can you offer support for an app that uses AGUI or A2UI like this if the UI is potentially very non-deterministic. Like it could be like the AI is really determining in this case what UI is deciding to show to the user. So how do you ensure quality? I think there were a couple other people that had similar questions, like Stacy Clouds. Declarative sounds interesting on for a chat that is interrogating data for the user, can then display in the best way. But how to support users when you don't know what they are using sounds, interesting. Yeah, it does pose some interesting new challenges. I'm curious if you guys have thoughts on that. Like,
So these are valid questions, and we often hear them. It is true that generative UI has some cases where some scenarios where it fits well. There might be others when you do not need to use it because you might decide that determinism is the most important thing. So in order for you to get some let's say leverage over how to use the generative UI, you as a developer have control over the catalog, so over what is rendered. You also have control over the system prompt. So for example, you might restrict the AI agent to return specific stuff that might not be appropriate, or somebody might want to exploit your AI, let's say, part of the app. Yeah, you can control the prompt, you can control the rendered components. And of course, what I see is that on the internet that there are some people that are using an idea, which is to either use some additional agents or some middleware between the calls, which gives a better granularity of what is rendered. So imagine that you ask for a form for, let's say, booking the flight, but you can intercept the answer by the AI. You might analyze it. For example, let's say you might use a separate agent that reviews the output. And if this agent decides that this output doesn't meet certain criteria, or maybe the user has somewhat work around it, some safeguards, this agent can also check the output once again. And if it doesn't fit the requirements, you can either, let's say, show the your standard form on the website, or you might ask the agent to regenerate the result. So it is more, let's say, think of it as a slider. So you move the value up and down. It doesn't fit all use cases, but there are a lot of use cases where this might be helpful and save you a lot of time.
Yeah, so not every user interface becomes a fully dynamically, agentically generated user experience. You can imagine, I mean, user interfaces that are intended to be more flexible, like explorative, I think is maybe the word, might really benefit from this approach, like dashboards where you're really trying to like dig through lots of different kinds of data and you want the agent to help you, and the user is very trusted. So like giving the agent a lot of flexibility in those scenarios makes sense. But then there's that spectrum, right? Like you can for different scenarios where, like, you want to constrain the type of user interfaces that the agent can display, then you can do what we talked about earlier. Like you create specific widgets for just the tasks that you want the user to be able to do, and only put those in the catalog, or you go all the way to a static user interface that's completely predefined that the agent just happens to know about. Like you have that spectrum that you can design with for depending on your use case.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And if you want to drill down an app right now, you cannot get a static app that is, let's say, static dashboard that is similar for everyone, but you can just talk with the UI and get the info in the UI that something that you need rather than having some predefined charts, for example. But just a note, because we've been asked a couple of times, I think it's an unknown thing, but it is your model, your data, your keys. So just yeah, because we've been asked a couple of times, and I just wanted to clear that out, that we don't keep the data, don't keep the model, don't provide it. So yeah, it's up to you to decide which model you're gonna use. So, going, if there aren't any questions, just a little nudge to run through the demos and all the resources. I'm pretty sure you can find a lot in the internet and the AI and Copilot and stuff like that. You can ask whatever you want and find as much info as you want to search for. But yeah, just a nudge that there are a couple of pretty good resources that you can run through. And to wrap it up, because yeah, there are a lot of names, a lot of protocols, frameworks, and yeah, it might be a little bit overwhelming, but 3 things to remember, and just to know if you forget them, just feel free to contact us. We're gonna be very happy to chat in more details and show you a little bit more if you're interested. So yeah, but the first built on Microsoft Agent Framework, you don't need to build all that functionality on your own, since Microsoft guys did pretty good job to provide the capability to orchestrate agents, and you then on your side build the rich user experience on your own. Integrate with A2UI. It's increasingly framework agnostic. As you can see, there is support for .NET coming up, and it shows the plumbing for agents for you. You don't need to reinvent the communication wheel on your own, but you can use one that is built for you. And then, of course, render agent-driven UI with Telerik UI for Blazor, and that way you're gonna map the whole AI journey. I have some pretty cool components to wrap it up and have a neat UX for you.
Awesome. So just to clarify for folks where each of these technologies is at, so that they know, kind of, people were asking earlier, I think, about the maturity of the technologies. So Microsoft Agent Framework is a shipped and stable agent framework library. So you can use that today in production. It's supported. It continues to evolve and get new features and so on. The AGUI support in Microsoft Agent Framework is currently in preview for .NET. And we're working towards soon, hopefully getting that to a stable state and a more feature complete state. So we're still working on that, but it is available in preview for you to use today. There'll be links in the resource list for you to learn how you can get started with trying out those previews. For the A2UI support that you showed from Progress Telerik, like Maya, Stamo, what's the state of that? Like, is that something that people can try out themselves? And what does that look like? Is it experimental? Is it preview?
The A2UI protocol is version 1.0. We are you can run through the demo inside the one that I showed you. It's inside the demos, and you can find it in the source code later this week. We're gonna release it together with the source code of the demos, and you can just give it a go. But it is in preview, so we are working on it and gathering feedback for users. So I'll generally be happy if you have any feedback for us.
Awesome. All right, cool. So we're on the bleeding edge here with some of these technologies, and it's great to see the types of scenarios that they enable. There were a couple more questions. Just want to see if I can squeeze some of these in since we have a couple minutes. Someone is asking about, this is the first time that they've heard about AGUI, and they're asking, is it an open standard? I think you talked to like some of the other protocols that yes, they are standard protocols. AGUI is as well. It's an open standard protocol that you can find. It was originally authored by Copilot Kit, but has a bunch of people that now collaborate on it. So yes, these are all open AI protocols and standards. Someone was asking about AGUI versus A2UI. Like as I see it, A2UI gets the data and A2UI renders it beautifully on the page. That's kind of true, I think. Again, A2UI is really about a protocol to enable you to build a user interface around an agent. And then A2UI kind of augments that with this declarative format for defining a set of widgets that the agent can then render as part of its user interface. So it's pretty good description. Not too bad. So that sounds right. And then we had that WebMCP stand up last week. So a couple of people are asking about the relationship there. Like, how does WebMCP fit into all this? Again, MCP is a protocol for connecting your agent really to tools, to functionality that the agent couldn't otherwise do. Like you can connect MCP servers to GitHub Copilot, or like the GitHub Copilot CLI or Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. It's a way to plug in functionality that the agent doesn't otherwise know how to do. WebMCP is a way to do that with a web app. Like your web app has things that it knows how to do. It can now, through WebMCP, advertise that functionality as tools to an agent that is living within that browser environment. So that's what that's about. It's not so much about UI per se. It's more about tool functionality being exposed from the UI. Could some of those tools be UI related? Yeah, they could, but it's not inherently a UI protocol. Is the way to think about that one. So hopefully that helps with that question. Similar question here, like, can we custom chatbot using WebMCP to leverage existing UI components rather than bring the UI functionality inside a chat box? I suspect that this is, again, confusing WebMCP with UI concerns, but many of the agents out there, Chat GPT or Microsoft Copilot or whatever, they are enabling support for these UI protocols so that you can render custom UI elements inside of them, like for various plugin models, like through MCP apps or and so on. WebMCP, not strictly speaking related to that. WebMCP is more about making tools available to those agents from a web app. Okay, hopefully that. I think we got all
In the case of WebMCP, you don't get the UI generated for you. You have it, and the components you have on the UI will have exposed tools, let's say sorting, filtering, or all the capability of a spreadsheet, for example. And you can ask again as prompt, but you will not have the UI regenerated or a new components added, but rather use the functionality of those that you already have on your app.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, like the tools can be UI related, and one of the things you guys showed last week was like you have your grid, and the grid decides to expose tools like filtering and sorting of the grid data to the agent. Those are just generic tools, but they happen to also, affect the UI. Like the grid will actually sort and the grid will actually filter. So yeah, there is that relationship there. So that can be done that way. All right, hopefully that helps. Stamo, Maya, thank you so much for sharing with us the great, awesome work that you guys are doing with Blazor and at Progress Telerik. Super cool stuff with AI. I hope everyone is motivated by what you see to go try out Microsoft Agent Framework, the preview A2UI support. Go check out the samples on the A2UI support that Progress Telerik's been working on. Feel free to post any comments on the video recordings if you have additional questions that we didn't get to today, or you can always find us on GitHub or social media. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.